Good to go. All right. So, good afternoon, everybody. Any questions? All right. So, my internet died this morning, about 35 minutes into the lecture. So, I recorded a little bit more on there, and I think we'll probably go over comparable stuff in this class, um, but we'll see where we get to. So a couple of things. First of all, your midterm exam is Friday. Okay, do not miss your midterm. You need to take the exam for the section for which you are signed up. If that's a problem, let me know today. Okay, because the exam's going to be done through Canvas, and you can only get to the Canvas shell that you're signed up for. So if you can't take your exam at the time of the class that you signed up for, you need to let me know right away so we can figure out what to do about that. Other than that, exam will be on Canvas. It will be 50 minutes. I'm actually going to give you 55 just in case, you forget to hit the submit button, but treat it as a 50-minute exam. And you'll mostly be typing code, right? Either writing code or modifying code. And I'll go through some details of this tomorrow, but take a look at the note on Canvas. I posted a practice exam that doesn't count for anything, but just to practice typing code in, because what you want to do ideally is write your code in your favorite editor, a plain editor, not something that writes code for you or checks syntax, but VI, something like that. But figure out how you're going to copy and paste from what you're writing into the text area. I think it's 6 or 7 questions. I haven't quite nailed it down. Nope, and you can do any of the questions in any order that you want. So the thing you see on Canvas that says midterm, that's just a placeholder. Okay. There's a quiz that will pop up that will be the actual midterm that you'll take. And so for this section, that quiz will open up at 2 o'clock on Friday, and it will close at 2:55 on Friday. For the morning section, it'll open up at 10 and close at 10:55. All right, so I'll go through, examples of copying and pasting to and from the quiz, just in case you haven't done that yet. I think most of you did this in 222 because we ended that course online. But we'll go through, and mostly you don't want to spend your 50 minutes for the midterm figuring out how to, write code the way you want and paste it in and stuff like that. And I'll work with what you do, but if I get a file from you, that's all left justified and has 3 blank lines between every line of code and stuff, it's just that much harder to grade. And it's harder for you to look at that and know if what you're doing is correct and so on. So take a look at the practice quiz, right? Just practice pasting stuff in, copying, and so on and so forth. We'll talk about it more tomorrow, but just be aware of that. Wow, this guy has a whole shopping cart of water and toilet paper. Should I be worried? I don't know. All right, so I want to talk about Eclipse today, okay? Because we're going to be using Eclipse for doing some of the GUI stuff we're heading towards. PA4 is going to involve making a GUI. We're going to be using the Swing package of widgets, and we're going to use a tool called Window Builder, which you can get to from inside Eclipse. I'm hesitant about setting you loose on an IDE. Some of you are already using IDEs, even though I'm asking you to not do that yet. Some of you have already been doing this, in other aspects of your lives. IDEs can be great, okay? They serve a really useful purpose. But here's an approximate analogy, right? If your job in life is to produce crown molding and sell, huge amounts of this stuff and be able to, tailor it to individual customers, get yourself a router, okay? Maybe a computer controlled router. It's a fantastic tool, lets you crank out, really precise contours on wood and stuff like that. If you're trying to learn woodworking, don't start with a router, okay? Start with sandpaper, a chisel, a saw, right? And work your way from there, right? Because the closer you are to the material, the more you have to work with it, the more you're going to understand it. And eventually, when you get to using, a big, fancy, powerful tool like a router, you can use it more effectively because you understand wood, you understand the material, and so on and so forth. And most people don't accidentally cut off their fingers using sandpaper, okay? So IDEs are kind of like wood routers, okay? They are large and powerful, and if you're using them in the right context, they can make your life so much easier. But you're not here to make your programming life easy, right? You're here to learn about objects, to learn what it means to think in an object-oriented paradigm, to learn Java to get better at the syntax, to learn about different classes and how they go together, and so on and so forth. And that means getting your hands dirty, getting in there and wallowing around in this stuff. And an IDE sort of prevents you from doing that, right? Which, if you already know Java and you're being paid not to learn but to do, use an IDE. And, in your own life, do whatever you want, obviously. But for learning this stuff right up to this point, first half of the course, I've tried to, force you to stick with the command line to give you, a good low-level idea of how this stuff works, how these pieces go together, and so on. But some of the things we want to do with GUIs and such take a lot of code that's not particularly insightful, right? So, for example, if you want to place 5 buttons on a window and put a text box right below them centered, you have to write a lot of code to make that happen, okay? With something like Window Builder or NetBeans or IntelliJ, you can just drag and drop these buttons into a layout manager and it will place them for you. And we want to concentrate on the coding part, okay? So I have an installation of Eclipse that I've been using for years. I've been tailoring it, I've been customizing it to my liking. It looks very different from the stock Eclipse, okay? It has a VI interface, it has certain things turned off, and so on. If you're just installing Eclipse for the first time, you're going to have the sort of out-of-the-box experience. So what I'm going to do here is I've moved my Eclipse out of the way. I'm going to do a fresh download and install of Eclipse. We're going to start using, the version that you'll be getting and see what it will be doing. And then we'll talk about ways to customize it a little, okay? But I don't want this to be an Eclipse course, okay? I don't want it to be an IntelliJ course. I want you to be able to use an IDE to assist you, but I don't want it to define how you write code, okay? And this is different, right? In a workplace, maybe you want a uniform coding style, maybe you want everybody to do the same thing. You do want the IDE or the programming environment to define how people write code. That's not my goal here, okay? I don't think that should be our focus. You're going to write code the way that you write code. That's how you're going to develop your coding style. That's how it's going to make the most sense. So we're going to try to use Eclipse. Eclipse is used in lots of settings, not just for people writing Java code, okay? It's been around for a long time. It's fairly stable. I don't have a high tolerance for IDEs, and I can tolerate Eclipse, okay? So for what that's worth, it's not horribly intrusive. So let's go ahead and download it. If you just Google Eclipse or Eclipse download, right, you should get to the Eclipse Foundation, eclipse.org, okay? There are other sites out there, eclipse.antimalware.com or something, right? Make sure you're downloading from eclipse.org, okay? I'm going to go to Eclipse Downloads, and instead of just saying download 64-bit, I'm going to go to Download Packages and see what's available. And the first one is Eclipse IDE for Java developers. That's what we want. Okay, IDE is the integrated development environment. That's what MATLAB is, that's what NetBeans is, IntelliJ, all that, right? puts all the tools that you're going to be using in a single place. We don't need the Enterprise Edition. We're not doing this for C, C+, and so on and so forth. We're doing this for Java. So this is the one that I want. I'm going to do the Linux 64-bit. Okay. Now, if you do the Windows version, you'll have a slightly different experience, but once you're in Eclipse, it should look very similar. So I'm going to take the default download site, and I'm just going to save it under, I'm going to make a directory called Eclipse. Eclipse stuff. And I'll save it under there. And it's not a bad download, it's about 200 megs. So let me hop over to my directory. Alright, so that's downloading. Wow, okay, my internet is really slow now. Maybe when they fixed it, they replaced it with a phone line or something, I don't know. We'll let that download for a minute, but I saved the download from this morning. Alright. So this is going to download. I'll start working with the one that I downloaded this morning. It comes as a tarball. So it's a gzipped version of a tar archive. So if I say tar tvf and I just type in the name of that tgz file, I can see what's in this archive. And it's all sitting under a subdirectory called Eclipse. Okay. And it's 1,500 files. Okay. So again, Windows, this will be a different install experience. Linux, which hopefully most people are using at this point, download the tar.gz file, untar it into wherever you want your Eclipse stuff to live. Okay, you can do this in your own directory. You can move it over to a system area. You can make links or whatever. And I'm not going to wait for this download to run because my network speed is really slow. So I'm going to pretend that I just did this download, and hey, there's my TGZ file. So 200 meg. So I'm just going to untar it into my current directory. So tar xvf and the name of the archive, and it'll unzip it for me. And this will give me an Eclipse subdirectory. And this is where my executable Eclipse is. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and run this. Let me make really sure that I don't have any remnants of this. Okay, I'm good. Alright, so you run Eclipse. You get a nice little splash screen here. And first thing it asks you is for is a workspace. Okay, so Workspace is basically a directory in which all of your projects and the files associated with your projects are going to sit. You can probably get away with one workspace for all of 223, or you can make one workspace for every project, or you can do like I used to do and just have one workspace for everything you ever do in Eclipse, and that's not a good approach. So I'm just going to make a subdirectory of my Eclipse stuff. And I'm just going to call it Workspaces. And I'll use that for my workspace. Okay, and I'll say use this as the default, do not ask again. Now a lot of the things that pop up in Eclipse will have this option saying, you know, accept my answer and don't ask me again. That'll cut down on your point and click activities, which is good. Alright, so we're going to say launch, we'll get our fancy splash screen again. And this will pop up a window like this. And it's a welcome screen. I've never actually gone through this welcome screen, so I'm just going to X this out. But you can look at it if you want. And this is basically the layout that you're going to have when you're working. Now, some of these things over here, like outline and task list, I'm going to close those out. I'm going to keep this area down here, right? This will show me problems. When I start making output from my program, I'll have a tab that says console. When I want to supply input, I can type it down here and so on. This is going to be where most of the things that I'm editing will sit. And this is Package Explorer. This is letting me look at the different things I have in my workspace. Okay, so let's make a Java project. So I'm going to say File, and I'm going to say New, and I'm going to say Java Project. Okay, we can call this whatever we want. So let's call this 223B Project 1. And I'm going to leave everything else the same, but let's look at what else is in here, okay? Now, I already had a Java environment installed, and if you've been doing Java on your own machine, you should have that. Java Standard Edition 1.8, that's a nice stable edition. It's not the newest, latest, greatest, but it's a good stable one, okay? That's a good one to use for the Java runtime environment. And you've got lots of options you can pick from. I'm not going to mess with it, okay? Create separate folders for sources and class files. That sounds good. I'm not going to worry about working sets for now. I'm just going to basically type in the name of my project and say finish. And now I have, my project name over here and a little arrow next to it. Anytime you see that triangle pointing to the side, you can click it and expand. And you can go down a rabbit hole really far like this. But don't do that. Well, I mean, you can look at it, but we don't need to do that, okay? We haven't put anything into this project ourselves yet, so there's really nothing to see. Let's make a class, okay? Every time that we've been doing a program in Java, we had to create a class, usually class main, and then inside that we make a public static void main. Or a class even, and then another class, PA1, which creates objects of type even, and so on. Alright, so I'm going to say File, New, Class. Okay, and there's also a button here we can click to make a new class. So it's going to put it under the source directory of my project. That's fine. Leave that as it is. Let's pick a name for this. So I'm just going to call it main class. It's going to say use of the default package is discouraged. I'm going to leave it there for now. Okay, we'll play with packages later. The one thing you might want to check on here, though, is there's a box which says, would you like public static void main created for you? Since I'm going to put a main program in here, I'm going to go ahead and check that. Okay, this is the slippery slope of laziness. Now the police are here, where the person used to be here with a cart full of toilet paper and water. This is an interesting parking lot I get to watch while I teach. Alright, so we're going to make a main class, and we're going to do a public static void main. Let's say OK. Hey, we've got Java code, right? Public class, main class, and there's our stub for our main method. And let's go ahead and write something here. So let's just print out hello world. So I'm going to say system, and it turns red, right? It gets underlined in red, and I get a little red X over here, and I get a little red X over here. And, it's possible that as soon as something turns red, you think that you've made a mistake. Okay? That's not the case. Okay, if I hover over this, it'll tell me syntax error, insert semicolon to complete block statements. Well, I don't want to put a semicolon here. I want to say system dot out. Well, now it's popped up a window. Okay, and this window is showing me things that I could be planning to type. For example, I could be planning to say system dot exit with an integer, right? So I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to type out. And now it's not only suggesting out, but it's also telling me what out means, right? So there's all this stuff popping up, okay? Sometimes this is really useful, okay? I think for learning Java, it's not so useful. I think it's distracting. I think it can pull you out of what you're trying to do, but it's interesting, right, if nothing else. Mostly I just ignore it, so I just keep typing happily. Print line, and now it's telling me about print line, and I'm going to hit a parenthesis, and it filled in a right parenthesis for me, and it underlined it in red. Well, I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to type a double quotation mark, and it filled in another double quotation mark, and I've still got red all over the place, okay? It's anticipating. Since I typed a left paren, I probably want a right paren eventually. Since I typed a double quote, I probably want an ending quote. And now I'm going to say hello. Now, I'm in the habit of typing for myself, so if I'm not studying the screen, I'm going to go ahead and type another double quote in the right paren. You can do that, okay? It will actually overwrite the double quote that it suggested, and I'll overwrite the parentheses that it suggested. Okay, and then I can put in my semicolon, and finally it'll be happy. All right, so what's the story here? Well, Eclipse is doing all of these things, right? Like trying to help you and saying, oh, I know what you're trying to do. Let me help you. Let me suggest this. Oh, that's not spelled right. Oh, don't forget your closed parenthesis, right? You can be ignoring it, or you can disable those features, right? But what I don't suggest you do is play Eclipse's game, okay? Don't get suckered into every time it underlines something, reading it and thinking about it and trying to figure out how to fix it, okay? Eclipse is a tool for you to use. You know how to write Java code, you know how to write a print statement, proceed confidently, right? And when you get to the end, if you've got things that are, you know, still being flagged as errors, pay attention to those. But particularly while you're writing a line of Java code, kind of ignore if it's yelling at you, right? All right, so let's go ahead and run this. So I can either hit the run button here, or I can do a Control F11, or I can just click run down here, whichever you like. So I'll just do the run option for now. And here's another pop-up, okay? Select the resource to save. This little asterisk up here next to main class says I've made changes that haven't been saved, okay? So check this option. I recommend always save resources before launching and say okay. And then in the future, anytime you try to run your code, it'll save anything that you haven't saved. All right, so it runs, and here's our output down here. It said hello. All right, so I'm going to copy this line, and I'm going to paste it down here again, and I'm going to say hello again, and run that, and there's our new line. Okay, so now you're starting to see the advantage of an IDE, right? This is a very rapid development cycle, right? If we're on the command line, I have to go into VI to edit. I have to make my changes to my code. I have to write them out. I have to say Java C to compile. If there's errors, I have to go back into my editor, go down to the line where the error was, figure out what the problem was, recompile, see if that fixed the error, and so on. And then when I'm done, I have to say Java file name to execute it. This is all happening kind of, you know, with one or two button clicks, okay? And that's really powerful. It's a really rapid prototyping kind of setup. And that's part of the power of an IDE. Just don't let it take away the fun for it, okay? So let's make a scanner. So we'll make a scanner on system.in. And, you know, I was looking at my keys when I was typing because I'm a two-finger typer. But it was popping up all this stuff anyway. Okay, and I still need a semicolon at the end, so I'll put my semicolon in. But scanner is flagged as erroneous, so hover your mouse over there, and it tells you scanner cannot be resolved to a type. It doesn't know what a scanner is, right? Well, what do we have to do? There's 7 fixes offered to us. We could import scanner from java.utility, which is what we want to do, or we could create our own class called scanner, or we could create an interface, or we could change it to signer, because I guess it knows what a signer is instead of a scanner, and so on, okay? So we're just going to say import scanner, click on that, and boom, there's an import statement for us. Okay, this is really nice, okay, and you can set it up to automatically import this stuff too. Alright, so scanner is now not causing complaints, and you know, if I hover over scanner, it knows what scanner is. It'll give me some information about it. Okay, and we can click through on these things, right? If I click on input stream, I'll get a new window. There's our Java documentation about an input stream. Okay, so integrated development environment, right? That's the IDE part. All right, now my SC is underlined in yellow. It's a little hard to see. I got a yellow thing over here, got a yellow mark over there. Let's hover over that and see what it's complaining about. And guess what? It says the value of local variable SC is not used. And it has 5 suggestions for us. Either get rid of SC and all of its assignments, or keep SC, keep the assignments, get rid of SC, or tell it not to warn us about these things, and so on. Well, we just haven't gotten to the part of our code where we're going to do anything with SC, right? So if you're worried about these things while you're writing, you're going to spend most of your time trying to understand Eclipse, okay? So this is why I say, you might want to get in the habit of just ignoring this stuff until you feel like you're at a place where there shouldn't be warnings or errors, and then pay attention to them. Okay, so let's input some stuff. Let's do string temp equals sc dot next line. And that one I did make a typo on. All right. Now this is normally I'm used to hitting the down arrow to go down to the next line. I can't do that now because I'm in this context menu, and I can't go over to the right because that's doing something until, right? So we'll figure out how to deal with that. All right, so I've got a temp string which is equal to sc next line. Now I got 2 things in yellow. I'm not going to worry about them. Let's just print out a message. Okay, so let's print out the thing that you typed in angle brackets. And let's say the length of the input equals, and let's add something to that. Okay, I want to know the length of the string. So I know temp is my string. I'm going to type temp period, and as soon as I type the period, I get this pop-up window, which actually I might find useful right now because I can't remember how to find the length of a string. Okay, well, here's all the types of things that I could call after the name of a string, and if I scroll down through that, it's like, oh yeah, length. Okay. And I can click on that, and it says, oh yeah, that returns the length of the string equal to the number of Unicode units in the string, etc. Okay, and you can double click on that, and it will insert it. Okay, at your own risk. But that worked fine. All right, so let's put our semicolon on the end, and that's a good line. So let's go ahead and run this. All right, so it says hello again, and I can type in something like this is a test. And hit enter, and it says you type this as a test, length of input equals 14. All right, so that's basic setup. This warning here is basically saying that SC is a resource that could be closed, right? We don't need to close it because we're opening it on standard in, but if we did close it without typos, right? Then that warning goes away, right? And now it's like nicely happy. All right, but I don't like closing standard in because then if you want to read something later on, you can't. So there's a basic development cycle. There's keyboard shortcuts, right? So there's my asterisk saying I made some change that I haven't saved yet. I can just hit Control S and save it. Okay. It'll save it when I run. You can also come over here and say File Save, or you can just do Control S. So there's always keyboard shortcuts, and those can be useful to know. All right. If there's questions along the way, shoot them out there, because I'm just going to go through this. So there's a utility called VWrapper, which will let you do VI inside Eclipse. Some people would scream if they saw me doing this, but I like VI. So I'm just going to, this site VWrapper on SourceForge, and this is set up so you basically take the install button and just drag it over, and it will install VWrapper for me. So I'm going to confirm that. I'll accept the terms of the license agreement, and yes, install anyway, even though we don't know anything about this, and it'll tell me I have to restart Eclipse for this to take effect. So we'll let that restart. We'll close out my browser. We'll close out the thanks for downloading Eclipse. All right, and I have a little button over here for VWrapper. So you can't see this, right, but I'm using VI style commands now. I can move forward by word and back, and I can Shift D to delete a line, and I can undo, and I can search for things, by saying slash, and I can move forward to the next occurrence and so on. So if you like VI, right, you might want to play around with the VWrapper. Now sometimes you need to also go into your key settings and disable some of the default key settings in Eclipse. Like Control D should move me down, but by default that's a delete. Okay, but it's a pretty true rendering of VI, and so that can be useful if you like that kind of thing. All right, well, you can make more classes. So let's make a new Java class. I'm just going to call this test class, or just test. I'm not going to put a public static void main. Actually, let me call it vector. All right, so now I have two Java files in my source directory. I have my main class and I have my vector class, and it started my vector class for me, right? Put down the basic definitions there. So I'm just going to do integer x, y, z, and I'm going to say, I don't know. Alright, so this is a pretty silly class, but it basically lets me construct a vector by passing 3 integers, and it will save those integers. And let's get the length of this vector. By taking the square root of the sum of the squares. And it probably wants me to turn that into an int by hand. So it's an approximate vector package. So I'll take square root of x squared plus y squared plus z squared. I'll turn that into an int and return that as my length function. I misspelled length. All right, so let's use this in our main class. Let's get rid of all of this stuff. Length faux v. Alright, so we'll call the length method of v, and we'll print it out, and we'll just go ahead and run that, and length of v is 5. That's believable. Alright, so pretty quick development cycle, right? It's warning me here that I'm importing something I'm not using. I could get rid of that manually. I can say remove the unused import. If there's multiple imports like this, I can remove them all in one fell swoop. So this will do things for you. It will potentially make it easier for you to do kind of the humdrum maintenance, but it can also make you a bit lazy. And, again, on the job, that's not a bad thing because you're not being paid to learn and improve your skills necessarily. You're being paid to develop code. But for here, we're a little closer to the metal. All right, what else can this do for us? Well, suppose I don't like the name vector. Suppose I wanted to call this something different, right? Like, fancy vector. Well, I have to change this to fancy vector. I have to change that to fancy vector. I have to change this and this to fancy vector, right? So over here, I'm going to right-click on vector.java, and I'm going to say refactor, and I'm going to say rename. I'm going to say new name should be fancy vector. I'm going to say update references. And it not only changed my fancy vector, in the class itself, called it fancyvector.java, change the name up there, change the name of the constructor, but the references to it, right, also got changed. So let's undo that. That seemed to undo it. And let's say this is a vector and length of vector v equals. Okay, so I have an uppercase vector in a comment here. I have an uppercase vector in a string here. Let's go ahead and refactor this again and say refactor rename, and I'll change vector to fancy vector. And I'll say finish. So this became a fancy vector. The constructor got changed, right? But my comment did not get changed, and my quoted string did not get changed. Okay. So this is safer usually and more powerful than just kind of doing a global replacement, right? Where you just say replace all occurrences of vector with fancy vector, right? Because why? It's an integrated environment. Right? The editor understands the language. It understands what the compiler is going to do. It knows that this is not, something that needs to be renamed just because this got renamed. So refactoring is a really powerful concept. All of these environments have, their own version of refactoring, and it lets you do things like, rename things, move things around, and so on and so forth. Okay. All right, let's look at the structure of this a little, and we don't usually need to mess with this, but it's worth looking at anyway. So 223B project 1, that's my main project. If you remember, I went to my download area and I made this Eclipse stuff and I made workspaces. Inside there is my 223B project. And under that I have a bin directory and a source directory. Okay. I don't see the bin directory, but I see the source directory. And under the source directory, I have a default package, and I have fancy vector in main class. Okay. Here under the source directory, there's my Java classes, right? My source files. Under the bin, those are the compiled versions. Okay, that's where it compiles these Java files down to, so that I can run my code. So you can try to do things like this. All right, like put a new comment in there, and it pops up inside this window, right? So to some degree you can work with these files directly, but be really cautious. In general, the more you mess with stuff from Eclipse outside of Eclipse, the greater the risk. Okay, you can do it, but keep backups, proceed cautiously, etc., etc. It's really meant to be an integrated environment. You're supposed to be doing everything from in here. And by the way, I misspelled haha apparently. So I can turn off spell checking, or I can add that to my dictionary, or I can say ignore spell checking on that word, or I can just live with, you know, red underlines in my comments. Wonder if it knows about haha. Nope, doesn't know about haha either. Would not do well in my course. All right. Let's talk about Windows. Okay, so we're going to want to create graphical objects the way that we were playing with yesterday, J-frames, J-panels, things like that. You need to do some setup first. Okay, so I'm hoping people will go home from class today and download Eclipse, get it installed, get the basic setup working, so we can start working with some specifics tomorrow. So here's part of the setup. Go under Help and say Install New Software. Okay. Work with, type, or select a site. I'm just going to select the same site that I downloaded from, which was 2020-03, right, the March of this year version of Eclipse. And you can type stuff in here and it will tell you what the download options are. Okay, the first one I'm going to type is swing. And I'm going to see a few things pop up. What I want is general purpose tools. Okay, and I'm going to do swing designer and swing documentation. I'm not going to worry about testing and this thing down here. Okay, I'm going to say next, and I'm going to say next, and I'm going to do accept these terms and say finish. And it's installing software down here in the lower right, 48%, which will suddenly jump. Suddenly jumping 48%. Everybody close your eyes, because if we look at it, it won't do anything. Okay, I peeked. It didn't do anything. 5283, and it's done. All right, and most things you have to restart Eclipse. All right, so now when I say File New, I have the ability to come down here under Other, and down here I can come under Window Builder, and I can come under Swing Designer, and I can say let's make a J-frame, right? And I'll call this what? And it's going to create all of this code for me that basically creates a it describes makes a class that extends a J-frame. It creates a J-panel. It sets the bounds of it, and so on and so forth. Okay. And so that's what we're going to use for most of our stuff. Okay, so I've already got a main program in here, so I'm going to close out this project. So this is a really important point. Don't ever keep more than one project open at a time. If I say new Java project and I start writing new code, there's a chance I'm going to be messing with files that actually belong to a different project. And that's going to be really confusing. So right click on your project and say close project. And the little triangle next to it should go away. That means your project's closed. Okay, let's start a new Java project. Let's call this GUI1. And I'm going to say File New. I'm going to say Other. I'm going to, again, under Window Builder, under Swing Designer, I'm going to say J-frame. And I'll just call this mainframe. And I've got a bunch of code. If I run this, I've got a J-frame. Okay. So this is really fast development. Okay. Another thing I want to point out, when you're running your code, this little run button down here turns red. Okay. You can hit that to terminate your program. That's like Control-C, or if your program exits, that button will go away. Your console down here shows you, the output from your code, and it's where you can place input. And be careful not to run more than one copy of your program at a time. Okay? If I run this and I hit the run button again, I actually have two instances of my program running right now. And if I come down here to display selected console, I'll see I have two instances of mainframe running. Okay, I have this one and that one. And if I close this one, right, it looks like my program has terminated. But if I look, I actually have another console window, which is that first mainframe, which is not terminated. So if I click on that, I can see that my session is still running, and I can close this out to terminate that. Okay, so creating these graphical elements, very straightforward. And the really cool part is that if I click on this design tab, I get a whole new interface where I can basically drag and drop buttons and labels and checkboxes and things like that. And so, for example, I could put a label over here, and I could put a text field over here, and I could put a button down here. And now if I run my code, I've got a widget with a label and a text field and a clickable button. And if I wanted my button to be over here, I can just yep, I pushed my luck, man. Alright, so this is the point where I mentioned that sometimes Eclipse is a little slow. Okay, and it can freeze up on you, and it will usually come out of it eventually. But you know, right now I'm trying to click on this tab, and it's confused. But a lot of times when you start working with a new graphical project, the first time that you try to do something like move an element, it will get brain locked, and then it'll come out of it. And then after that, every time you try to do it, it's pretty efficient. This is starting to look like maybe it's not going to come out of it. But anyway, that's probably a good place to end it for now. So I'll start looking at. So we'll go through, you know, a little bit more about the midterm tomorrow, and you know, I'll go through the practice quiz and show you some hints and ideas for copying and pasting answers. And then we'll start digging into making GUIs in earnest using Window Builder and Swing. Alright, have a good rest of the day. It just started raining, so stay dry out there, and I will see you next time. And hey, here's what happened to my Eclipse. Fatal error has been detected in the Java runtime environment. I got a seg fault. Boo. Hey, it happens, you know, even to large projects like Eclipse. So, alright, have a good day. Bye.